Okay, welcome everybody to our April round of our monthly volunteer onboarding for the Mifos initiative. We look forward to using this opportunity today to explain to you more about the initiative, the ways we work with volunteers at all levels across the community, both technical and non-technical. Okay, well, once again, thank you everybody for joining David and myself for this month's monthly onboarding of our volunteers. In terms of the agenda, we just want to briefly go over a little bit about the Mifos initiative, our broader social mission, and how it's used on a daily basis to bring financial services to the poor. Then we'll give a bit deeper dive on our tech stack and then talk about the various project needs and then discuss the next steps and leave time for question and answers at the end for everybody. So just a little bit about Mifos itself. We're a global 501c3 fintech nonprofit, and we aim to democratize financial services and help to transform the delivery of financial services, primarily digital ones, to the world's 3 billion poor and underbanked. And we do that leveraging the power of the cloud, mobile, and most importantly, our open source community. This here that you see on the screen is Marie Claire from Rwanda. She represents our shared vision of creating a world of 3 billion Maries in which we're able to create a better life for these individuals as well as their entire households through access to financial inclusion and other financial services. So collectively to date, we're reaching more than 65 million individuals across 500 different organizations that use our open source APIs to power their various solutions. And so a couple critical pillars in which we do this is this notion of commoditization of the core banking software layer, which we'll talk about subsequently. And then our goal is to really enable the last mile delivery into functional accounts, as that's a critical barrier in enabling these institutions who go the last mile to have access to scalable, modern, affordable technology. And then the only way we can do this and reach the 3 billion is by unlocking a virtuous cycle and then taking an ecosystem-based approach, working with local system integrators to build solutions on top of the platform. So throughout the years, we've received a number of various different awards for financial inclusion in open source community. Want to highlight the most recent one in which one of the projects using our software was able to win the prestigious Open Source Reuse Award for the future of government. And so this was our FINA Bien project in Mexico. And so before we look at where we're going, just want to take a few steps back to look where we've come from. So we've been around for quite some time as what the industry now calls a digital public good. So we had our origins just as a white paper almost 2 decades ago called the Microbanking Open Architecture Project. This was in response and recognition to the needs that microfinance institutions worldwide lacked adequate systems that were actually built for their needs and able to be scaled out as well as supported locally. So that's where the vision for an open source core banking software originated. And so the project was formally adopted within the Grameen Technology Center and became the Mifos project, and then had its initial launch in 2006. And then I led efforts with other colleagues to spin it out in 2011 as its own separate initiative so we could have the room to breathe and grow as an open source community. And then throughout the years, we've made a number of transitions. But most recently, we've also launched our payment hub, which was also certified as a digital public good to provide payment orchestration in addition to our core banking system. And this past year, we launched Gazelle to provide a rapid deployment tool to help with the adoption of our digital public goods in the space of governments and digital public infrastructure, which we'll talk about in today's slide. Just another look at how we've evolved in 2006 when we first launched. At the time, we were the world's first open source web-based MIS for joint liability group lending. And then when we spun out in 2011, we relaunched and rewrote the software from the ground up to focus more broadly around financial inclusion and have a headless platform with a full API that's enabled the innovation that we'll talk about soon. And this was called Mifos X. And then we also donated the software code for the backend into Apache Fineract. And so we've maintained the backend there. But right now, we're putting a deeper focus on continuing to carve out the distinct digital public goods that sit within Mifos. But over time, we've evolved to help the industry adapt at all layers of evolution, from microfinance to financial inclusion, and now more broadly to digital financial services as a whole. So I want to go back to a couple of those key pillars we noted at the beginning. First off, around this openness. So not just having open source technology, but an open community and open source business models to help scale solutions. And then this concept of the virtuous cycle where everybody in the community is endeavoring to be on the latest upstream code base and contributing back, such that if I build something for my institution or you build something for your institution, we collectively can benefit. We collectively help to maintain and create that virtuous cycle to unlock new innovation and lower the overall total cost of ownership. And then coupled with this virtuous cycle is an approach, an hourglass approach to our architecture that Pramod Varma likes to highlight. And so at the bottom part of the hourglass, we want to enable as much supply side innovation going into the platform. So we do this by providing those core open source primitives so others can come and help to maintain and build the underlying components that power the core banking layer. And then at the top of the hourglass, we want to stimulate and enable massive demand and use cases to be developed on top of the platform itself. And so we do this by providing full RESTful APIs that enable the ecosystem to build apps and innovation. And by adopting both this virtuous cycle as well as this hourglass approach, that's how we believe through a small team with a massive global community, we can help to achieve that vision of 3 billion Maries. And then going back to this notion of commoditization, we fundamentally believe that we can disrupt the full financial services sector at large and not just financial inclusion. So while financial inclusion is our key focus, we believe that's just the tip of the pyramid for us. And by commoditizing the core banking infrastructural layer, we can enable innovation to occur on top and enable widespread innovation across a variety of use cases, which we'll discuss today. And so just one of the other pillars we spoke about was this ecosystem-based approach. And so across this ecosystem, one of the critical members is our partners, which we'll talk about, but volunteers who we're speaking to today play a very critical role as well in helping to augment the capacity of the small team that David and I guide within the Mifos initiative. And then volunteers help across a number of areas to augment our ecosystem and help to amplify the efforts across the global community. So part of what we're working towards is our 2030 vision campaign. And so our goal is to reach 500 million clients by 2030. So I need to update this slide to represent the growth we've already achieved from 20 million clients to 65 million clients, but we still have a long way to go to get towards that goal of 500 million with all these solutions that are built on top of the platform. So I'll skip over this slide, but it centers around this notion of creating primitives or open source building blocks. So going back to that concept of commoditization, we recognize that for financial services, the way in which you deliver and manage a loan account, a savings account, like an insurance product, an equity account, is relatively similar across the globe. And so that's why we believe by creating these building blocks or primitives for core banking and payments, we can enable widespread innovation as all the institutions that you see on the screen here can use and benefit from our software. So that's why we focus on building out the core layer and then enabling an edge-based approach with innovations and integrations built around the edge. So we'll come back to this slide a bit later, but to summarize the digital public goods or the open source projects that we make available, the first and foremost one is our core banking system, Mifos X, which we discussed the evolution of. And as part of like the Mifos X product suite, we have the Mifos X platform. We then have a Mifos X field officer app, and then we have the Mifos X web app for staff. And then for payment orchestration, we have what we call our Payment Hub Enterprise Edition. And this helps in two key ways. First off, for the digital financial service provider that is actually providing an account to an individual, it provides that integration and connection layer into a digital payment system. So this might be a mobile money system, or this could be a real-time payment system or a traditional system like Swift. And then we also utilize the Payment Hub in alignment with the GovStack payment building block specification to provide an orchestration layer for government to facilitate government to person payments as well as person to government payments as well. And then our vision is to combine the delivery of both the core banking as well as the payment orchestration layer in shared infrastructure that can be delivered via a multi-tenant architecture to smaller MFIs and SOCOs that provide that last mile reach. So I'll come back to another slide later on, which gives more details on this. So I'll skip over this for now. And then wanted to show these two slides real briefly, just to demonstrate this core and edge-based approach. So the components you see in pink are where we envision our ecosystem being able to innovate and develop new apps, innovations, and integrations. And then the blue components is where we want to unlock that virtuous cycle where the community helps to maintain these underlying primitives and common components as part of this core infrastructure, commoditized infrastructure. And this is just another view of that, where once again, the blue components are the common elements, and the pink elements are the edge-based components that can be built by the community or integrated with by the community. And before we take one more closer look at the tech stack and the volunteer projects that we have, just wanted to touch upon a little bit about the programmatic areas where Mifos as a 501c3 nonprofit focuses. So the first off is to help unlock this ecosystem-based approach that I spoke to previously. And so this primarily centers around this partner community of system integrators that either build solutions on top of the APIs or provide localization and support around the core open source system. So our goal is to act as that secretariat hub and create tools like a partner directory, app store, et cetera, to help identify service providers as well as curate solutions for others to utilize. And then we act as the connective tissue and to provide the collaboration as well as governance mechanisms to help the community collaborate both technically and non-technically. And then at the level of the product, we aim to drive a roadmap that aligns with the needs of our user and aligns with our mission to build out and extend all of the products that we discussed earlier, and then to enable those contributions back into Mifos as well as Apache Fineract. And then last but not least, we aim to act as a thought leader, educating and making the industry aware of the opportunity to build on top of a commoditized core banking infrastructure to unlock that virtuous cycle and how to create digital transformation through our digital public goods. And so in terms of the ecosystem, I touched on this already, but another key aspect I want to highlight is just in terms of the delivery. We want to do that by leveraging a multi-tenant cloud architecture by shared infrastructure through these smaller institutions, as well as rapid deployment through our tool, Gazelle, which we'll talk about on a subsequent slide. And then at the level of the community, apart from events like this, the webinars like this to bring on volunteers like yourself, we facilitate a number of working groups. So David was just leading the AI for All working group earlier today. And we have an architectural working group and a documentation working group. And then we're aiming to have more in-person collaboration in the coming months through the reinvigoration of some of our local chapters. But then we mentor through programs like Google Summer of Code and Code for GovTech. And then we also maintain the documentation and other collaborative infrastructure for the project. And I already spoke to the virtuous cycle and hourglass-based approach. And then just so you're a little bit aware of how we steward the product, we use the Atlassian suite to guide our roadmap, to guide issue tracking, to develop requirements for the features. And then we're communicating primarily across Slack and then some of our community mailing lists. And then around education and advocacy, we host online webinars like this, the working groups I mentioned before. And then we aim to participate and speak at as many industry events as possible. And then we also aim to provide case studies and analysis of the impact and reach of the users of our software, which is another way in which volunteers can be involved too. So before we look at the tech stack, just wanted to show how we've continued to evolve the breadth in which our platform can be reached and the number of cases that it's utilized for. So the first use case for our software, and still the primary focus, is around financial inclusion and reaching the base of the pyramid. So there we're envisioning to both digitize as well as digitally transform those institutions like SOCOs and MFIs that I mentioned. And then for governments, we aim to provide the payment hub to help provide the critical payment layer for P2G as well as G2P payments, and also to provide accounts in the cloud if those are necessary. And then where we've seen a lot of organic growth is around the banking as well as the embedded finance and fintech sector. So in the banking sector, we see a major opportunity around helping to modernize legacy infrastructure for banks, as well as provide modern infrastructure for new banks from the start. And then lastly, around fintech and embedded finance, that's where we've seen a tremendous amount of growth from direct to consumer fintechs, but are now also seeing more infrastructure as a service fintechs arise as well. And so this slide helps to demonstrate some of the use cases in which our software has been adopted primarily on the lending front, but our goal is to help enable more of this innovation and have all of these logos on the screen contribute back to that virtuous cycle by not only building solutions for their customers, but also contributing back and helping to maintain the core open source projects. And so let me skip to just a look at, well, yes, first I'll talk about the non-technical volunteer needs, and then we'll shift gears a bit to the tech stack and have a closer look at the product itself. So for the non-technical volunteer needs of the community, we like to bucket these in three different areas. First would be around closely tied to the product itself, but this is around, some of the softer areas of the product and supporting users in their implementation and adoption journeys. And then the second would be around enabling engagement and interactions across our community. And the last bucket would be around actual fundraising, outreach, and some of our communications and press efforts. So first off, around product and user support, we, as you've seen from the previous slides, maintain a number of different products, and helping to create that virtuous cycle means working with limited resources who aren't going to be there all the time. So it's all the more critical that we can have as efficient and organized of processes in place to help with the full life cycle of managing the development and release of new features into those products. So we need help with volunteers with product management and business analyst backgrounds to help us with requirements gathering, helping to write functional specifications, helping to, research trends and other solutions we can integrate with, helping with the roadmap and the actual triage and prioritization of features and bugs, and then helping us, project manage some of the external contributions that are flowing back in. And then we're always looking for designers to help with all of our web and mobile apps, as we want to ensure that our designs are driven by user need and they're as accessible as possible, aligning with some of the safeguards and design-based approaches that the industry is adhering to. And then our documentation work group focuses on making our documentation as up to date and accessible as possible at three different layers. So the technical documentation in terms of APIs and the developer experience, as well as our user documentation in terms of using and configuring the software, and for those implementers actually implementing the software too. And then we always need translators to help with translations of the user interfaces as well as the documentation itself. This just notes some of the working groups we've had. Let me skip over. Yeah, let me go back to this slide here. And so around community engagement, there's a number of ways in which we need volunteers to assist David and myself here. So first off, we're looking to have volunteers that can actually help us coordinate with other volunteers. While we remove some friction by having some of these monthly onboarding calls, it still is a lot of effort to help onboard and give each individual volunteer a more one-on-one and tailored experience. So we're looking for volunteers to help with that. We need volunteers to help with our collaboration as well as communication tools. So I know one of the areas for Abraham was potentially around our WordPress site. And so there's a lot of work that we know needs to go there. So looking forward to working with volunteers in areas like that, but also to helping to maintain our wikis, helping to update like how we distribute our documentation, build out knowledge bases, etc. And then we're always looking to continue to do market research and analyzing how we can continue to keep pace with trends across the industry. And then around the outreach and fundraising and communications bucket, on the communication side, given that widespread ecosystem we have of use cases and areas where the software has been adopted, we're looking to develop more case studies and more testimonials of the impact the software is having. And then we're also, looking to have volunteers help us with developing some of like the print as well as online collateral and graphics to help us better tell our story, write better copy to promote our mission, and then develop video and other content as well. And then we aim to, as a 501(c)(3) nonprofit, we can solicit donations across a number of areas, including individuals as well as the general public and foundations. So there's help in doing research or outreach on those levels too. I'll skip over that slide here. And then, yeah, before we dive into the product stack, or maybe I'll pass it over to David because I know I've dominated the call here. So David, I have like the brief slides on the products here if you wanted to give an overview of each one of those. So.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So we have 4 product areas. We'll work through them. So the first one is Mifos X. So this is our core banking account and portfolio management system. So this integrates to the Apache Finamact backend, the piece of code as Ed explained at the beginning. We donated away to the Apache Software Foundation a few years ago. But what Mifos X does is it really makes it usable and deployable to end users. So it adds that web application on the front end. It integrates to a number of our mobile applications I'll talk about in a moment to enable users to be able to access it as well. And it provides, that heart of a core banking system. We actively employ a core edge architecture. You'll hear me refer to this a few times as we go through our product sets. This is because we realize that there's many different application scenarios and use cases that will need to be put in, so it needs to be a flexible product. But it also really encourages innovation to come in as well. We're not going to be experts in everything. There's other projects, other DPGs, for example, that are experts in fraud and risk management, etc. So having that core edge architecture and being more modular allows us to interface to those other projects and bring those benefits to Mifos X users. And of course, it can be hosted in the cloud or on-prem, because obviously with some financial software regulation in certain countries, we need to also allow for on-prem support. If you want to go to the next one, Ed. So next we have a portfolio of mobile applications. This is quite a vibrant area of our community, actually. We made a decision a few years ago to move to Kotlin multi-platform as a technology, because that enables us to develop once and deploy many times in many different architectures across iOS and Android. And our community has become sort of one of the vibrant communities for Kotlin multi-platform. So a lot of people come in to enhance their skills, but also therefore give back. We have a range of mobile applications, from mobile banking applications, obviously interface into Mifos X, so you can see the status of your loans, your savings accounts, etc. We have a mobile wallet application example. We have Mifos Pay as well, and we have field force applications as well. So for field officers going out doing loan approvals, so they can interface into the back end. We're also exploring how to integrate into PISP Open Banking. That's probably the lowest developed of our applications at this present point in time. It's more a proof of concept. Then moving on, I believe, yes, we have Payment Hub EE. So Payment Hub EE is our payments orchestration engine and software. So this is 2 types of application really that we've seen. So traditionally it was developed as being a way to interface between core banking systems and modern payment rails and other systems, and create the workflows and flexibilities to drive that payments orchestration. But actually, we also developed it towards the GovStack specification over the last couple of years, which means a government could use this software to manage the key journeys that they need to do, such as government to person payments for disbursements, etc., or even receive payments in for things like visas, taxes, etc. So it's got those 2 application approaches. And again, as we mentioned, we again gone for a core edge approach, which enables the core to remain relatively stable and not need as much maintenance, whilst a connectorized edge enables us to very quickly develop, or people within our ecosystem develop connectors for different systems they need to connect to. And it's a fully scalable solution, so it can be deployed in many different architectures, from very lightweight architectures through to highly replicated redundant architectures as well, which enables us to scale. And then on to Mifos Gazelle, which Ed kind of knows is a bit of my baby because we launched this in December last year. So Mifos Gazelle is a DPI as a solution tool, or DAS tool, as it's commonly acronized in the communities these days. What this enables us to do is much more rapidly deploy ours and other DPGs. So if you gone and tried to deploy Payment Hub EE, you'd have to read through the documentation. You try deploying it; it might take a couple of weeks to successfully deploy and get it up and running. Doing that through Mifos Gazelle means you literally have to type run.sh deploy PHEE, and 15 minutes later it's fully deployed and up and running in an environment. And likewise, it can deploy other DPGs, so it can deploy Mifos X. It can deploy VNext, which is a payment switch. And we have a number of other DPGs, which Mifos don't manage, who want to participate for registration systems, workflow management. It's got quite a active roadmap and things we want to do. It's got a number of projects that obviously are going to be supported through GSOC and Code for GovTech this year as well. So by the end of the year, we hope to have something that's got real functional demos, the ability to build demos and MPV journeys if you're exploring DPIs, especially financial DPIs, and the end-to-end journey. Integrate lots more DPGs. I think we'll probably have 5 or 6 integrated by the end of the year, but maintaining that simplicity, ease of install, and ability to go across different platforms. I have no idea what slide Ed's got next, so I'll have to pause until it goes.
Yeah, well, David, I was gonna have to actually
Cool.
transition to a mobile device. I might hand over the controls of the slides to you. I think if you wanted to go through more detailed aspects of the, product areas, you could, or you could just maybe talk about the AI initiatives, and then I think we probably could transition to the Q&A session portion of the meeting. But let me both make you the host. So one moment. I think
Yep.
you're now the host. And
Done.
then, yeah, in terms of the slide deck, let me get to that AI for all slide. So let me just cycle through to it. Yeah.
Okay. So as I mentioned at the top of the call, we've got a number of different working groups, and one I was on a few minutes ago, and I think at least one of you was on that working group with me, is our AI for All. So Mifos is very interested in how AI can support us in achieving our mission and support our end users in accessibility and be able to do things. So we have a number of different levels of AI integration in our products already. So we already looked at things like machine learning credit scorecards. We've got some simple chatbots that are being expanded out, and there's a lot of work around that at the moment within the community. And we've also done projects in the past around things such as aggregate scoring and bank statement analysis, of being able to import a PDF, read it, and therefore help with loan generation, etc. So We're also looking at other areas generative AI can be used. So can it be used to help support within our community? Can it be used to support our documentation? So it's easier as we do releases. I hate to say this, but developers hate writing documentation. So is there a way we can actually help the developers by making it more easy and more productive as we go through release cycle generating that stuff? We're looking at large action models, we're looking at fraud detection. We're also looking at what the appropriate level of use of AI to support us in our coding is as a project. There's different views on that, as different people have different views on AI, as we all know. But we do definitely see some role for, co-pilot type of assistance in helping us to generate code and keep code simple and clean, etc., as well as maintaining code and making sure we understand vulnerabilities within our stack and dependencies. So that's the work at AI for all working group we've got. I don't think I can select move on the slides. Right. So what is the next steps? So you will have seen in the webinar chat, I've already given you a link to the volunteer form. That's because I don't recognise all your names off the top of my head from having sent you an email saying, thank you for volunteering, please join the call. The reason for filling in that form, obviously I can email you back, we've got your details from coming on this call, but what that'll enable us to do is add you to some of our mailing lists and some of the other stuff, as well as me be able to send you a few more details. So if you haven't filled in one of those forms before, it'd just be really easy and simple if you could, to help us make sure we can keep in touch with you. What I will be doing after this call as well is sending you a few questions to find out a bit more about what your interest is. We can chat about some of that in the Q&A in a moment as well. But based on what your interest is, try and identify how we can fit you into the community if you're not already fitted in, who you can talk to, who you could buddy you as well, because we recognise having such a large, vibrant community, it can be different. It can be feel difficult to step into conversations because there's lots of people chatting and know each other already. So to support you in that sort of way as well as understand some logistical bits like where you're based, what sort of time zones you're in, what sort of time do you have to commit, and where do your skills sit. So that survey will come out shortly after the call. Probably a day or two later, just because what we'll do is put the video up and I'll send the video link at the same time to you.